The easiest way to do the drainage of the engine is to drain down the bottle. You don't need to drain down the entire engine, just enough to get the liquid below the level of the head and the top of the cylinders. Now having drained the bottle down, we'll remove the nipple fitting for the heated carburetors. There'll be a small amount of antifreeze leak out, but nothing detrimental to anything in the motor. Now I have to unhook the hose on the other side. All we're doing now is just tying the carburetors back so they're out of the way as we remove the reeds from the motor. Changed from the stock Ski Doo reeds to the V4 style pedals and reeds. Gives you typically a 2 horsepower gain in the engine, as well as a lot better throttle response, especially crisper through mid-range and bottom end. You see the gasket you can reuse because it wasn't torn or damaged in any way. If you destroy them or damage them in any ways, you need to change them. Yeah, when you remove the old gaskets, typically it leaves residue from the gasket and the surface needs to be cleaned. Any gasket residue, so the new gaskets will seal properly. Once that's done, generally, it's a good idea at this time to take a look at the intake side of your pistons to see if there is any scoring. As you can see, this piston has a very minor scoring, and that's typically just from snow ingestion or seeds, those sort of things that get sucked into your airbox. By no means is there any detrimental damage at all. Typically, it's just scored through the moly coat of the piston. Typically, when you remove the carburetors in the reeds, you'll see that there's oxidization on the boot. That's very normal and very typical from the reaction of the aluminum to atmosphere. Best thing to do before you install the carburetors back into the new reeds is to clean the outside surface of the sealing surface of the carburetors. We typically use brake clean and on rags, and that'll wipe off any of that oxidization. I see them so bad at times that they're actually chunks that are hard oxidization that could get into the engine. They may not create damage, but they will definitely create a scoring effect onto the piston. Once you've opened up the box of V-Force reeds, you'll see that it comes with 2 new intake boots, the 2 new reed blocks. It also comes with the gaskets needed and the bolts. But in a typical application, you use the stock bolts that you remove from your 2004 up 800 HO or 600 HO. A couple of distinct differences between the pedals. V-Force reeds use a carbon fiber reed, and the Ski Doo is a stock plastic reed. More flexibility with the carbon fiber, easier to open and close, more flow from them versus the stock Ski Doo reed pedals. And typically that's where your gain comes from. The typical installation is the gasket to the cylinder, then the reed spacer, and the gasket to the reed spacer, and the V-Force reeds through that. And the next thing is to fasten the boot or hold the boot to the reed block itself. Install it in the cylinder and install the bolts. Strictly the one in the computer. Before we install the carburetors, we give it a little squirt of WD-40 on the top of the carburetor. It just creates a slippery surface for the carburetor to be installed into the boot, and they snap right in place. After a period of time, the WD-40 will dissipate and you'll have no problem with it whatsoever. Once the carburetor is in place, the heated carb hose should be slid back onto the fitting and the clamp put back in place. Next thing we're going to do is reinstall the airbox. And the same thing for them, it's just a little squirt of WD-40 on the throat of the carburetors. And as you slide the airbox back in, that's the time to re-plug the temperature sensor back into the box. Okay, last step is to reinstall antifreeze and fill it to the cold level on the bottle. That's the final step in installing the V-Force reeds, to make sure that the carburetor bolts that hold the flange on are put tight and stuck to the surface so you don't have any